Welcome to the Creation Evaluation Station, where I give in-depth reviews of models and construction kits, both new and old. Mostly Lego, but other products as well. I also give a review and discussion of other creative works, such as movies, cartoons, and video games. Today, we shall be discussing Morbius, and I keep forgetting to do this with these, but I have got to give the rating for this. This is a PG-13 movie, so sorry. I know I do have younger audiences that can come to this channel, so unless your parents say otherwise, this movie's not meant for you. That being said, it's a vampire movie, so you would expect blood, and there is blood. It's not overly gory, though. It's definitely not on any par with, say, Deadpool or anything. But there is death and blood and some violence. It doesn't get too extreme, and a lot of it gets covered up. But we'll talk a little bit about that later on. But it's a very dark movie, too. So, a lot of shadows. So you don't see a lot. Is it a scary movie? That's debatable. There's one or two scenes that get a little hairy, but the thing is actually a fairly tame movie, especially vampire movie. Now, vampire movies don't just have blood and gore. Some of them have romance. There is a love interest in this. It's not a really big it's not a romantic movie whatsoever. There's a bit of a love interest going on, but they even mentioned beginning, just for a heads up, if you don't know, and this isn't really a spoiler, but the main character is trying to cure an illness that he's had since a child, one that could kill him. He's survived through many years unexpectedly. He could have died any time, and so the same goes for his friend that he's also trying to cure. But the two of them have a discussion. It's like, why even think about love when tomorrow I could be dead, so it doesn't pay heavily into it, but it's there lightly. And they don't make a big deal about it. That's the thing with Marvel movies. They aren't heavy romances. I think the biggest heavy romance we have is with Scarlet Witch and Vision. But even that it's fairly light. Love is there, and we'll talk a little bit about that before I go on. There's love there, which isn't always in the form of, the man and woman falling in love and having kids and sex and everything else. A good example of this, although they were opposite sex, was Hawkeye and the Black Widow. Sorry. Got screwed up there with the red hair that she has at the beginning. But they have a sibling love. Like they're found siblings almost. And that's what makes Endgame so impactful. And that hits so hard. I watched that movie and it's like, well, it makes sense more for Hawkeye to survive because he does have a wife and kids. He's got a family, but she's part of that family too. Maybe not directly, she's more of his sister than his children and wife and whatnot. But the feelings are still there. God, the best and worst moments of that movie. I don't know if they can even consider that worse, except for how bad it hurt. but then so did yeah, the first part there too, when Vision dies. But you know, they don't have lots of romance, but it's there. There's some romance, and then there's just some camaraderie, friendship, and that's love too. There's love there. Love doesn't have to be sex. It doesn't have to be romance or anything like that. But that being said, this is a vampire movie. It's kind of more of a generic vampire movie. It didn't weigh heavily on the romance, and also not heavily on the violence and stuff. It was a Marvel movie. And on that note, was it a good Marvel movie? I would say it's about mid-level for Marvel movies. It wasn't the most amazing thing. It wasn't bad either. And it could have been worse. It could have easily been worse. So, yeah, it's a good movie. And I don't know. Part of me says it may have not even been worth going to the theater and watching. Just wait until it comes out on streaming. Or back in the day, I would wait for it to come out on TV and watch it that way. But it was definitely a decent movie. I went to go see it because it's a Marvel movie. You always keep up on those, and we've had some interesting ones lately. Some of them have been hits and misses for sure. This could easily have gone worse because it's a very simple story and could have lost its viewers easily. Like it's a very simple premise that Marvel has used before and stuff, where it's simply a scientist, or in this case a doctor, which kind of the same, at least in this movie, is trying to cure himself and other people who also have the illness, and in the process of doing so ends up creating a monster. This is an age-old tale between Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. There's also, a bit of mix of Frankenstein in that as well. So that's a little bit different. But there's stories that have been told before. I mean, just look at the Hulk, and you'll know. He wasn't trying to cure himself, but he was, trying to do the betterment, and he ends up creating a monster. And there's a lot of other things like that. And but if it had just been that, it would not have held the movie. No. Instead, they added, it's basically his origin story. And a lot of times, these superhero movies try to have an origin story and then a regular story on top of that. So you end up with a division in the movie where it's almost two movies in one. We have the origin and the other thing. And the thing is, if you just show the origin half the time, that won't hold up for a movie. And in this case, it wouldn't have either. But you have it intertwined with his friend that he's also trying to cure. And we find out from the very beginning, and this isn't a spoiler, I will have a little bit of a spoiler towards the end, but we find out from the beginning he's not quite the same constitution that Morbius has. And this comes out very important later in the story. But so the story between these two guys is what really propels the story later on, because it actually doesn't take too long before he's become a vampire. So yeah, the story ended up being pretty good, or it would have been boring if they had just stuck with that, or I don't know, boring, but just we've seen this before. There's nothing new, interesting here. But the friend added an additional dynamic that really helped carry the story along, especially later on when things kind of. There's still some conflicts that have not been resolved, but it definitely made the story more engaging. Now. The character was the actor did a very good job with the character. I mean, part of that is the writing as well, but he's definitely a like, he did a very good job, and the character is ends up being a sympathetic villain. Although in this movie he isn't that much of a villain. I do like how Sony is tackling more of the villains of Marvel than you know, the Disney's MCU or whatever. Did I really like Venom? Well, you see my video on that probably up here. I'll have a link and at the end. But despite my feelings on that, it's interesting how they're actually dealing with and working with these villains, and that, like I said, this was a pretty good movie considering it's a villain movie, sort of. Like I said, he's a sympathetic villain, and how he relates to Spider-Man, because he's a Spider-Man villain, is he ends up, I mean, it's kind of obvious, he ends up mutating his genetic code to survive this illness, and mixes it with a bat, so he gets bat powers. You know, he's the Marvel version of Batman, only a lot more darker than Batman, if that's what can be said. But he is a Spider-Man villain, and he's after Spider-Man because Spider-Man also has had genetic manipulation through the bite of a radioactive spider and stuff. So he's trying to cure himself by getting Spider-Man's DNA and blood, or Spider-Man doesn't want that because he doesn't want people, you know, great power comes great responsibility. You can't just give that power to other people. There's that aspect, and just, you know, they could become monsters and everything else, which Morbius is already a monster of sorts. Which he's trying to cure, because he ends up curing his illness, but in the process has to keep drinking blood to continue. And it's like before he needed blood transfusions, now he needs to drink blood. But so did he really? Can he cure himself? Is a question. He just made things worse. And that's addressed towards the beginning. That's not a spoiler. But yeah, he's a sympathetic villain. The actor did an amazing job of making you feel for him, despite, you know, the bad things that he ends up doing, mostly involuntary. I've said pretty much the good things about the movie, though some of the bad things I didn't like about the movie. It had some interesting, good fight scenes, but they were hampered by some of the special effects they were doing to show his powers. And it was kind of like this blurry smoke stuff, which, if you're blurring up the action, that kind of makes things worse. Now, I think they could have done it, just toned it back a little bit. At least so you could see most of the detail. It like fuzzed up the detail, and that was the worst part. Other than that, it was kind of a cool idea, but I think it was done too much. Speaking of special effects, there's some points where he quote unquote flies. Now, he doesn't really fly, although yeah, that's kind of debatable. I liked how they showed it. Basically, he's got radar, right? So he's got that radar. But he can you know, check out his surroundings for quite a distance, and, you know, echolocation and all that. But it can also read the wind movements, and I liked that they did that. The problem is, he ends up using this to fly by flowing into the wind that's being moved, right? And I liked how they showed it. It felt very scientific, except the part where he actually kind of flew. because he has no wings to catch the wind. It's, I don't know, mixed feelings on that one. It really broke my sense of disbelief with that, but that's my scientific mind. He like, you know, scientifically can read the wind. It's like, oh, this makes so much sense, and then he kind of just jumps into it without wings or anything. It's like that's the air movement is not going to keep up a human body. We aren't aerodynamically, you know, aerodynamic or light enough or anything for the wind to do that. And so it feels like he suddenly got supernatural power when everything else has been very, you know, much more natural enhancement through, you know, natural abilities from a bat. And yes, maybe the bat can feel that stuff, but bat also has wings and can fly, literally flap its wings and propel itself forward and upward with its own strength. So it's not terrible, but it bugged me a little bit. All right, we're going to go into spoilers. Before I do that, I wanted to discuss something because it's not a spoiler, a possibility, and something I was kind of excited and hoping for. We didn't get it at the teaser because there's other stuff they got planned, I think, and we're going to talk about the teaser too in the spoilers. Though it wasn't much of a spoiler since when the movie came out. Well, yeah, we'll talk about that later. Just it'll be in spoilers. Sorry if you want to know beforehand. But I would like to see, with this entry into the, I don't know, do you call it the MCU? The Fox? The Sony Marvel Universe? The SMU? I don't know. They still aren't quite tied together. I mean, I don't know how to put this. But I would like to see, with this new vampire movie, Morbius, another Marvel vampire make his return, and that would be Blade. Would really like Wesley Snipes to do it again. He was great as Blade. I don't know if he's up to it again, but and for story wise, it makes perfect sense because part of Blade is a real vampire of the, you know, Vlad the Impaler, Dracula descendant type thing. He's a real vampire, not an artificial one like Morbius is. Although one could, they called him a natural vampire or whatever in there too, which is kind of makes sense. But the thing is about Blade is although he is a regular vampire, he's not a regular vampire because he is what they call a daywalker. He can walk out in the sun, which the regular vampires cannot. And as you saw in this movie, Morbius has no problem with the sunlight. He's hiding his face because he doesn't want people to see who he is, but he's not hiding from the sun. So, yeah, that would be interesting because both of them would be able to walk into the sun. And the story behind Blade is that while he was being born, his mother got attacked and turned and supposedly killed and whatever. And so he's some kind of anomaly that lets him walk in the sun. And he still has problems with craving blood and stuff, and he's taking meds to stop it. The similar lines to what happens in this movie. Still has the cravings, although I don't think it's quite as strong or what. But that would be an interesting contrast. And he's essentially become a vampire slayer. He's trying to end them all. I mean, for one, he's trying to get revenge on his mom. For two, if he kills a head vampire, it's the whole, you kill the head vampire and all the other vampires, stop. So if he comes across the vampire, he can cure himself of his own curse. But you can see where he might end up going after Morbius, even though it's not related. He doesn't know. He's just. But they would clash. They would definitely clash somehow, since he is a vampire slayer hunter. Morbius, at least, doesn't appear to be, right? So yeah, we'd like to see a return of Blade. If somebody else has to play him, that could be okay. But Wesley Snipes did a great job. Loved his. Some of the movies were hit or miss, whether they were amazing, but still like him in it. But yeah, okay. It's time. Time for spoilers. So if you haven't seen the movie or don't want to be spoiled, please leave. Remember, creativity is creaky. Goodbye. And I'll see you in the next video, which probably won't be a movie review, although we do have another one coming up. I'm really excited for Sonic the Hedgehog. Really excited for that one. So yeah, bye for now. If you're still here for spoilers, okay. You know what happens now at the end, where his friend ends up getting turned and they have to fight. And this is what, I was talking about. If it wasn't for the addition of his friend, the story would have been cut short. It wouldn't have been as interesting. And it was, it's interesting because although they have the same health problems, they are not the same people. And you see that when they were kids, and Lucian goes on his little rampage and stuff. And that is very important for later on because it shows his character. And yeah, they end up on opposite ends of what they're trying to do. Morbius is still a doctor, even though he's been turned into a vampire, and he doesn't want to hurt people. While the other guy is just like is bathing in the bloodshed and in the power. And you almost can understand where he's coming from to some extent. But it's the wrong way of doing things, obviously. And Morbius disagrees with him. And they fight. And Morbius's partner, who's been helping him with this, / girlfriend, we're gonna call him girlfriend, even though they weren't officially in the movie. It was obvious. They didn't come out and say, hey, we're dating or anything. But obviously there's stuff going on there. And it's kind of sad because the friend ends up killing basically the father figure to them that's been taking care of him while he's been sick and everything else, which is, why did you have to do that? I mean, it kind of gets the point across, I suppose. But then, Morbius is hanging out with his girl on the thing. They get away, or he goes off to fight Lucian, but Lucian ends up coming back and getting his girlfriend and killing her, coming pretty damn close to it. It's unsuccessful immediate death, but she was dying, and Morbius ends up giving her some of her blood before he ends up taking off. I don't know. I have to watch that again. It doesn't look like he purposely was doing it, and it was more accidental. But it's like, as soon as I saw that, I'm like, she's not gonna die, and it was right, which they showed at almost the end of the movie. is now she's still alive. I mean, it was easily because it was foreshadowed pretty hard with how they discovered that the serum worked with the rat. Or, yeah, it was a rat. Because they show it die. They thought he was die. And then later on, other things happen. They look over. Oh, it's alive. So, it's like, yeah, they're going to fake her death out too. Yeah, so she comes back, but we don't know what happens after that. We just know she's alive. She made it. What kind of monster did she turn into? Or, I mean, she's a doctor too, so I assume she wouldn't be immediately going on rampages like the other guy. But also, it seems like when they first turn, of course, they're practically coming back to life, that they tend to feed uncontrollably, because that's what happened with Morbius on the boat there, the thugs. But yeah, those are some things I noticed that neither good nor bad. It just, I think they could have been more subtle about things, or maybe it's just me figuring out the story as they go. Nothing bad about it, but points I noted. Okay. The movie was good. Everything was fine. Excited for the end credits. Credits start rolling. And then we get the mid-credit scene, the other credit scene. And it's like, what? What? And to be honest, I kind of took it for what it was, and it was a bit weird. I mean, I was thinking afterwards, why would Morbius be hooking up with the green... Not the Green Goblin, Vulture, from the... I didn't think about it too deep, but it's kind of funny when I think about it. Just a busy day. I didn't have too much sleep that night. I don't remember, but we had a busy morning getting groceries and doing other things before we went and watched the movie. But yeah, after the movie, I'm like, why would they team up? I don't get why they're teaming up. I've seen some reviews when I got home. Not that I used them to make my own review. I kind of, but I like to see what other people think. Just like I'm sure you're here watching this now, seeing what I think. So I'm checking out the other channels. It's like, oh well, this is teaser for them potentially forming the Sinister Six. I'm like, okay, well that makes that more sense. And that was I think the next day that I watched that video and realized that this video's a little bit late. I've not gotten these mastered to get them out the same day or even the next day sometimes. But okay, that's fine. And I had a lot going on. I was doing other things that day, and that night when I'm getting ready to go to bed, I'm sitting in bed, playing on my phone, doing some things before I go to sleep. And suddenly struck me, it's like, that made no sense. Why is MCU's Vulture in essentially the Sony universe's movie? Same universe Venom is from. That doesn't make any sense from Spider-Man. What is going on? Now, before I tell you what I rationalize, it doesn't make sense because we learned in the Spider-Man movie that it pulled villains from other worlds into the MCU who knew that Peter Parker was Spider-Man. That is what they said. Why would it pull the villains from that world who were already there in their jail? He was jailed, and I said something about him dying. I was like, no, he wasn't dead. He was just in jail, and then pulled them into the other world. I mean, technically, he was just a bank robber, anyways. He didn't really kill anybody, so they wouldn't have put him on death row or anything. But yeah, so they pulled them out of the MCU and pulled them there. And I'm like, that is not how the spell works. and it wouldn't send him back. Like I said, um, like they could have somehow said that he got there from another world, and he's been in the MCU all this time for some reason, and got there from some other reason that we don't know. But they also had a clip where there was a news broadcast with this man that nobody's know of or nobody's heard of, there's no record of, which means he doesn't have a counterpart that exists there or anything else. So, I mean, if he'd been there in the past, then they would know. But so it just didn't make sense. So I'm thinking about it. Well, maybe this is not a a teaser for a Spider-Man movie. Maybe this isn't after the events of, or during the events of Doctor Strange, the multiverse madness, however the title goes. The second Doctor Strange movie, where we have the multiverse of madness. Yes, multiverse of madness. Like maybe it has to do with the events of there. That would make more sense, though. It also didn't really give us any hints that that's what was going on. But that hasn't happened yet. We don't know what events are actually going to happen in there. There's going to be, a bunch of crazy multiverse stuff going on there. So it would make sense if this would happen there. But, like I said, I looked at reviews and things online, and I saw a video about them explaining that. And apparently the producer came out and actually said, no, this has to do with the Spider-Man thing. And then it's just like, what? This doesn't make any sense. So, yeah, the end credit scene, I wish they never put it in the movie. I was enjoying it until that happened, and suddenly nothing made sense anymore. So those are my thoughts. Like I said, it's a decent movie. I'm not quite feeling like I could say certain people really liking it enough that they would go to the movie theater. That said, I know people who like vampire movies, and they might not be getting what they like with this movie. It's a Marvel movie. It's not really a vampire movie. Either way, it's not Twilight, and nor is it, what's it called there? Forgot the name. But it's not your regular vampire movie, so it's a Marvel movie. And an okay one. It's not bad. Not amazing though. No endgame type stuff or anything going on here. And it was a little bit more on the serious side. It wasn't quite as fun as some of them are. It did have its lighter moments, not a lot. But I said it was more of the drear, more serious kind. Kind of reminds me of the Hulk movie, the one with Ed Norton in it, and that one was more serious. Well, you could definitely say you had your fun with it too, with a couple characters and the fight with the Abomination at the end. But yeah, it's a more serious movie, so I could see people not super enjoying it as a Marvel movie either. Along that said, it's not quite as bad as the Eternals. But it's serious wise. It's not quite as serious as that movie. That one, I mean, there was some fun moments, there were some fun characters, but overall that one was a little bit more drier with its fun. A lot drier than this fun. This one is a little bit better with the knot. So yeah, that's it for my thoughts. What are your guys' thoughts? I mean, maybe you haven't seen the movie. Are you gonna go see it? What do you think of the trailers or whatever? I didn't think about that, but the trailers, I think, give a good feel for the movie. The atmosphere of the movie. You know, like I said, just talking about the fun and seriousness and how that pans out. Yeah, if you plan on going on watching, let me know what you think. If you've already seen it, let me know. We can talk a little bit. Just keep the spoilers hidden. And don't forget, if you enjoyed this, to like and subscribe and comment down below, of course, like I've already been saying, and give it some YouTube love. My Facebook page and other social media links are all down below. There's a Patreon link I think I've got down there now. You can just disregard it for right now because I don't have anything there yet. I just got the bare bones set up. I've got to do more work for it. But if you do see something there, then feel free. Depends on when you watch this. As moment of posting, there's nothing there. Not much there at all possible. And thanks for watching. Remember, creativity is key.